Emily had always believed that mornings were the quietest part of the day, the space where she could breathe before life demanded anything from her. But that Sunday morning in Seattle changed everything the moment she heard her bedroom door open. She was halfway through changing her clothes for the family brunch she planned to cook. She had laid out a soft blue blouse on the bed, something comfortable for a relaxed day at home. She thought the house was empty upstairs. Mark had already left for a quick errand, and she assumed Liam was downstairs making coffee, so she didn't worry about closing the door. As she slipped the blouse over her shoulders, the door swung open. Startled, she froze for a second, her breath catching. Standing in the doorway was her stepson, Liam, 23 years old, grown, responsible, respectful, someone who never crossed boundaries. His eyes widened in shock the moment he realized what he had walked into. He reacted quickly, looking down at the floor as if he was searching for something. Then stepped back with an apology so rushed it almost tangled over itself. Sorry, I thought you were downstairs," he said, already backing out. "It's all right," Emily replied, pulling her blouse into place as fast as she could. She tried to sound calm, even though her heart was racing from the suddenness of the moment. "Just knock next time, okay?" The door closed immediately, and silence filled the room again. But it wasn't the same silence. It was heavier, quiet, in a different way, as if something had been stirred that neither of them meant to disturb. Emily stood still for a moment, trying to process what just happened. It had lasted only a split second, nothing more. No harm, no intention, just an accident. But the feeling it left behind lingered like a warm echo, uncomfortable and hard to explain. She sat down on the edge of the bed, letting out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't embarrassment that stayed with her. It was something more complicated, something she didn't want to acknowledge. The moment didn't feel wrong, just unexpected. And in that surprise, a quiet tension had entered her life, slipping into a space she didn't know existed. Emily shook the feeling off and continued getting ready. She brushed her hair, tied it loosely, and stepped downstairs with the hope that a normal day would reset everything. But when she entered the kitchen, she found Liam standing by the counter holding a cup of coffee like he had been trying to calm himself. He lifted his eyes slightly, then lowered them again, clearly unsure how to act. She smiled gently, hoping to make things easier. "Morning, morning," he replied, his voice soft and cautious. It wasn't awkward in a dramatic way, more like both of them were trying to convince themselves that nothing strange had happened at all. Emily focused on setting plates on the counter while Liam quietly moved aside to give her space. It was unusual for him to be so quiet. He was usually relaxed around her, comfortable like family, but today his presence felt different, careful, almost fragile. Trying to ease the moment, Emily spoke casually. "I didn't hear you come upstairs earlier." "I was looking for my charger," he answered quickly. "Didn't mean to walk in without knocking." "I know," she said, keeping her tone light. "It happens." But even as she tried to brush it off, she felt something shifting inside the house. The air felt tighter. She was aware of every small movement, his steps, his breathing, the way he kept adjusting his grip on the coffee cup. Liam wasn't acting strange because of attraction or anything like that. Was simply embarrassed, trying to respect her, trying not to make things uncomfortable. That sincerity was something Emily had always admired in him. As they moved around the kitchen, she noticed how Liam tried to avoid looking directly at her. It wasn't avoidance in a cold wet, felt more like he didn't want to make her feel uncomfortable. He respected her too much for that. But in that effort to be respectful, an unspoken tension formed between them. Not romantic, not forbidden, just a quiet awareness that something unplanned had happened. Emily tried to return to normal, but her mind kept going back to that brief moment when the door opened. She knew it was innocent, yet it made her realize something she rarely thought, about how little space she allowed herself for vulnerability. With Mark gone most days and her marriage slipping into quiet routines, she had grown used to moving through the house almost unseen. Having someone walk in on her oven accidentally felt like a reminder that she existed, that someone noticed her presence. Still, Emily didn't want the morning to define the day. She prepared breakfast quickly, working faster than usual because she didn't want time for awkwardness to settle. Liam helped without being asked, passing ingredients, wiping the counter, staying close enough to assist but far enough not to crowd her. His every movement showed that he was trying to make things normal again. When the meal was ready, they sat in the dining room, still quiet, still careful. Emily stirred her tea and finally spoke. "You don't have to act so tense. It's all fine." He looked up, relieved but still gentle. "I just didn't want you to think I'd do something like that on purpose." "I know you wouldn't," she said with a reassuring smile. "You've always been respectful." The softness in her voice seemed to calm him, and some of the tension eased between them. But something else remained, a strange awareness that neither had asked for. Emily wasn't drawn to him in a romantic way. He wasn't looking at her with anything inappropriate. But the moment had opened a door inside her thoughts, one she didn't know existed until now. A door that reminded her how emotionally empty. Her marriage had become Mark rarely noticed her anymore. She had grown used to being unseen. But in one accidental moment, she was suddenly reminded of her own presence, her own vulnerability, and the loneliness she tried so hard to ignore after breakfast. Liam stepped outside to take a phone call, leaving Emily alone at the table. She stared at the half-empty cup in front of her, feeling a swirl of unresolved emotions. Nothing inappropriate had happened, and yet the moment lingered not because of desire, but because it exposed the silence in her life. She told herself it was just an accident, a simple mistake. But deep down she knew that the quiet shift in the house would not disappear so easily. Something fragile had been stirred, something emotional. Something unspoken, and she had no idea how it would shape the days ahead. And as the morning sunlight spilled across the table, Emily realized one truth. That tiny moment had opened a new chapter in her life, whether she was ready for it or not. After the strange morning incident, Emily hoped everything would settle back into normal life. But normal had slowly disappeared from her marriage long before that day. Her husband, Mark, had changed over the past 2 years. He used to be affectionate, the kind of man who left small notes on the fridge or surprised her with weekend plans. But work had taken over his life. He traveled constantly for business, and when he was home, he was tired, distracted, or glued to his laptop. Emily tried to understand. She tried to be patient. But the distance between them didn't feel temporary anymore, felt permanent. That Sunday afternoon, she sat in the living room preparing a grocery list for the week, and she could feel the weight of silence around her. It was the kind of silence that made a home feel like a hotel lobby, a place people passed through instead of lived in. She wondered when it started, when her marriage stopped feeling like a partnership and began feeling like an obligation. Mark used to ask about her day. He used to sit beside her, talk to her, share jokes, share frustrations. Now, he barely noticed when she looked tired or lonely. While she wrote on the notepad, Liam walked in holding a pile of laundry. He moved with his usual polite calm, the way he always did when he didn't want to disturb anyone. Since moving back home after losing his job, he tried hard not to feel like a burden. He cleaned up after himself, bought some groceries when he could, and kept a respectful distance from his father's marriage problems. But he noticed things. Emily knew he did. As he passed the living room, he paused. "You need help with anything?" he asked softly. Emily shook her head with a small smile. "I'm okay, just planning meals." There was a moment where he didn't move, as if he wanted to say something more. Then he stepped closer, setting the folded laundry on a chair. "You've seemed tired lately," he said. "Is everything all right?" His voice wasn't intrusive or curious, it was gentle, like someone who cared simply because he had a kind heart. Emily didn't expect the question, and it caught her off guard. Her throat tightened slightly, not because she was emotional, but because someone had finally noticed. "I'm just overwhelmed," she admitted. "Your dad has been busy." Too busy. Liam nodded carefully, his expression soft. He's been working nonstop. I barely see him either. Emily appreciated that he wasn't picking sides. He wasn't criticizing Mark. He was just acknowledging the truth. For a brief moment, she felt seen, truly seen. Something she hadn't felt in months. Liam helped her carry groceries into the kitchen. When she returned from the store later that afternoon, the quiet comfort he provided wasn't dramatic or intense. It was subtle. He lifted heavy bags without being asked. He put items on high shelves she couldn't reach. Kaylee listened when she mentioned new recipes she wanted to try. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was simply the presence of someone who paid attention, and attention was something her marriage lacked that evening. Emily set the table for a dinner she hoped would bring some warmth back into her home. She cooked Mark's favorite meal even, though she knew there was a chance he wouldn't show. While she stirred the pot, Liam leaned against the counter, offering to help whenever she looked tired. His simple, steady kindness eased her stress more than he realized. When everything was finally ready, Emily checked the clock. Mark had promised again that he would be home by 7:07 came. 7:15 passed. 7:30 crept in. She sighed quietly, trying not to show disappointment. Liam noticed anyway. He texted. Liam asked gently. "No," she said, wiping her hands on a towel. "But he usually gets stuck in meetings." "You shouldn't have to wait alone," Liam said in a quiet voice, watching her with concern. She didn't answer because she didn't want to admit how much it hurt every time Mark broke a promise. By 8. Emily realized the dinner was getting cold. She sat at the table anyway, telling herself it wasn't a big deal, telling herself she was used to it, telling herself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered that she had spent the whole day creating something warm while Mark didn't even call. It mattered that she felt like an afterthought in her own marriage. It mattered that she felt invisible. Liam walked in and saw her sitting there alone. His eyes softened instantly. "You don't have to wait," he said. "I can sit with you if you want." Emily's first instinct was to refuse out of politeness. She didn't want to drag him into her emotional world. But deep down, she didn't want to eat alone again. She didn't want another silent, painful evening staring at an empty seat. "Sure," she said quietly. "Some company would be nice." They sat across from each other and ate dinner in slow, comfortable silence. Liam complimented her cooking, making her laugh for the first time that day. It wasn't a dramatic moment or an emotional confession. It was simply human connections, something she had been starving for. After dinner, they washed the dishes together. As they worked side by side, their hands brushed while reaching for the same plate. It was accidental, quick, harmless. But for a moment, they both paused, not out of attraction, but out of awareness. Awareness of boundaries. Awareness of the fragile space between them. Liam stepped back immediately. "Sorry," he muttered, embarrassed. "It's fine," Emily said gently, not wanting him to feel uncomfortable. But even though nothing happened, the moment reminded her of the gap in her marriage. She wasn't drawn to Liam. She was drawn to the feeling of being acknowledged. Something her husband had forgotten how to do later when Emily went to her room. She sat at the edge of her bed thinking about everything: her loneliness, the distance. In her marriage, the way Liam's simple kindness filled a silence she couldn't ignore. She didn't want tension. She didn't want confusion. She didn't want her heart to drift anywhere it shouldn't. She wanted her marriage back. She wanted Mark to see her again. But as she lay down that night staring at the ceiling, she realized one painful truth: someone noticing your loneliness can feel dangerously comforting when the person who should notice no longer does. And that quiet realization was the beginning of the emotional storm she never expected. The morning after the quiet, delicate dinner with Liam, Emily woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself that nothing wrong had happened. It had only been a simple dinner, a harmless brush of hands, a moment of comfort between two people who happened to be under the same roof. But the feeling stayed with her like a shadow she couldn't explain. Mark had come home late that night, long after she had fallen asleep, leaving a short text. Meeting. Ran late. Don't wait up. Didn't hurt as much as it used to, maybe because she had already expected it. But what did hurt was the growing awareness that she no longer missed him the way she once did. The distance felt normal now, and that scared her. More than anything else, when Emily came downstairs for breakfast, she found Liam in the kitchen pouring cereal into a bowl. He looked tired too, like he had spent half the night thinking. Their eyes met for a second before both looked away, pretending they didn't feel the same awkward pull from the night before. Morning, she said, keeping her voice light. Morning. He replied, just as careful. There was no tension of desire. Nothing inappropriate, just the discomfort of two people who had crossed into emotionally delicate territory without intending to. They moved around the kitchen quietly, taking steps to avoid each other even when there was plenty of space. It felt like they were trying too hard not to make anything feel strange. And that effort itself made the air heavier. Emily left for errands soon after breakfast, needing distance to clear her mind. While driving, she kept trying to understand what she was feeling. She wasn't falling for Liam. She cared for him the way any adult woman might care for someone younger who treated her with kindness and respect. But lately, his presence filled the silence that Mark had left behind. And that created a thin, emotional line she didn't want to cross. She told herself the simplest truth. She was lonely, and loneliness made small moments feel bigger than they were. When she returned home, she found Liam in the backyard fixing a loose fence panel. Sweat gathered on his forehead, and his movements looked frustrated, like he was fighting something inside. He didn't see her at first, so she watched him for a moment's determination. His sense of responsibility, his quiet way of helping without asking for anything. She stepped forward. Need help? He turned quickly, surprised, then shook his head. No, I've got it, just keeping busy. His tone wasn't rude, just strained. Emily sensed that he too was trying to distance himself, trying to bring everything back to normal. She appreciated his maturity, even if it created more silence between them. Later that afternoon, Emily started preparing dinner. It was early, but cooking helped her think. As she chopped vegetables, she tried to focus on simple tasks: the rhythm of cutting, the warmth of the stove, the comforting smell of onions frying. Liam walked in quietly and offered to help before she could say anything. I can stir that, he said, reaching for the spoon. She hesitated, but she didn't want to make things strange. Sure, they worked side by side like the previous night, but this time both were hyper-aware of every movement. He kept his distance, careful not to stand too close. She kept her hands steady, pretending not to feel the emotional weight that hovered over them. When their shoulders brushed accidentally, both went still. It lasted a fraction of a second, but it was enough to frozen them in place. They didn't look at each other. Instead, Liam stepped back sharply, placing the spoon down as if it suddenly burned him. Sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to, get in your way. Emily swallowed hard. It's okay. It was just an accident. But the accident lingered in the air like a quiet spark neither wanted to acknowledge. Liam ran a hand through his hair, avoiding her eyes. Emily, I don't want things to feel strange between us. They don't, she lied gently. He shook his head. I know you feel it too. Not anything wrong, just tension. And I don't want you to be uncomfortable because of me. His honesty caught her off guard. It was rare for someone to speak so openly, so carefully, yet so directly. She respected him for it. She respected the fact that he was younger, yet more emotionally aware than many people his age. She answered softly, I don't want tension either, but I think we're both carrying too much right now. Liam nodded slowly. It's just, you've been so kind to me since I moved back, and seeing you hurt, it gets to me. I don't like watching you feel alone. Emily felt something in her chest tighten. Not attraction, just the ache of hearing something she hadn't heard in years. someone noticing her sadness. "I'll be fine," she whispered. "I just need to." Her words were cut short when her phone buzzed. Message from Mark. "Running late again. Might not be home for dinner." "Sorry." Emily's shoulders slumped involuntarily. Liam saw the message from the distance of her reaction alone, and his face softened into concern. "You deserve more than being second place to his job," he said quietly. She looked up at him sharply. "Liam, don't. I'm not criticizing him," Liam said, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm just telling the truth. You're hurting. Anyone can see it." His voice was calm, not emotional, not dramatic. Just honest. That honesty made Emily feel exposed in a way she hadn't expected. She turned back to the stove, stirring the pot even though it didn't need stirring. She didn't want her emotions to slip out. She didn't want to cry in front of him. But Liam stepped closer, not too close. Close enough that she could hear the sincerity in his voice. "I'll give you space," he said softly. "I don't want to make things harder for you." Emily nodded, unable to speak. The air felt heavy with things unspoken, with feelings they didn't want and didn't understand. Liam stepped out of the kitchen, leaving her alone with the simmering pot, and the realization that emotional lines were far easier to cross than physical ones. You didn't need romantic feelings to feel complicated. You didn't need inappropriate thoughts to feel tension. Sometimes all it took was attention, simple, gentle, human attention from someone who cared. And as the evening settled over the house, Emily understood that the real danger wasn't between her and Liam. The real danger was the widening space in her marriage, a space Liam had unknowingly stepped into simply by being kind. And when kindness meets loneliness, the heart becomes vulnerable in ways it never expects. The next morning began with rain tapping softly on the windows, a steady rhythm that made the whole house feel quieter than usual. Emily woke with a tight feeling in her chest, knowing the emotional tension of the last few days couldn't continue. Something had to change. She didn't want confusion in her home, didn't want boundaries to feel blurry. She didn't want her loneliness to create misunderstandings with someone who had shown her nothing but respect. But she also couldn't keep pretending her marriage was fine. She moved through the hallway slowly, almost afraid of running into Liam too soon. She didn't want him to feel guilty. She didn't want to make things awkward. She just needed clarity within herself and within her home. When she reached the kitchen, she found him already there, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. He looked tired, as if he hadn't truly slept. From the chair out of instinct, like he felt he needed to be careful around her. "Morning," he said gently. "Morning," she replied. The air between them wasn't heavy with attraction or anything inappropriate. It was heavy with unspoken emotions, his concern, her loneliness. Their shared discomfort about the strange tension that had slipped into their lives. Emily made tea and sat across from him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain outside filled the silence, giving both of them a chance to prepare for whatever conversation was coming. Finally, Liam exhaled. "Emily, I'm sorry for everything, for the awkwardness, for making things feel complicated. I never wanted that." Shook her head quickly. "You didn't do anything wrong. You've been kind. Too kind, maybe. That's all. But I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he insisted. "You're important to me. Not in a wrong way, just as someone who's been good to me when I needed support." His sincerity was almost painful. Emily's heart tightened. "I know," she said softly. "And I appreciate it more than you realize." He looked relieved, but also uncertain. "I just don't want to overstep. Ever." Emily wrapped her hands around her warm cup, staring at the steam rising from the tea. "You didn't overstep," she said. "I'm the one who has been confused, not because of you, but because my marriage has been falling apart for a long time, and I haven't wanted to admit it." Liam's expression softened, but he didn't speak. He waited, letting her continue in her own time. "I feel invisible," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "Your dad barely looks at me anymore. He's working constantly, comes home late, leaves early, and when he's here, he's somewhere else in his mind. I try to understand, but understanding doesn't stop the loneliness." Liam lowered. His eyes, his jaw tight with sympathy, not anger. "I didn't realize how bad it was," he admitted. "I didn't want anyone to notice," Emily said. "I didn't want to make you feel responsible for my sadness." "You didn't," he replied immediately. "But I noticed because you deserve more than feeling alone in your own home." His words hit her deeply, not because they were the words of a younger man, but because they were the truth. Because someone finally said out loud what she had been afraid to acknowledge. Emily took a slow breath. "That's exactly why I need to fix this. Not with you, with Mark, with myself, with this house." Liam nodded, but something in his face changed, like he was wrestling with emotions he didn't want to show. "Are you going to talk to him?" he asked. "Yes," she said firmly. "I have to. I don't want this strange distance to grow into something it shouldn't. I don't want to rely on you for emotional support. That should come from my husband." Liam didn't argue. He simply nodded again, this time slower, more careful. "That's good," he said quietly. "I want things to be right for you. You deserve that." Emily felt a swell of gratitude. "And I want things to be easy between us again. No confusion, no tension. You've been such a gentle presence in this house, and I don't want anything to ruin that." Liam offered a small, warm smile, one that showed both relief and sadness. "We'll be okay," he said. "I'll give you space. Whatever you need," but Emily shook her head. "I don't want distance between us. I just want clarity." He understood instantly. Then clarity it is. The conversation ended softly, but with a sense of peace that hadn't existed in days. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt steady, like she knew the next steps she needed to take. Later that afternoon, Mark came home early, a rare surprise that startled her. He walked in with his laptop bag still hanging from his shoulder, looking exhausted but unusually aware of his surroundings. "We need to talk," she said before he could say anything else. Mark frowned but nodded, setting his bag down. "All right, what's going on?" Emily took a deep breath. "I feel like we've grown apart. You're always working. You're always gone. And when you're here, you're not really here." Mark looked shocked, almost confused. "I'm working to provide for us, Emily. You know that." "I know," she said gently, "but providing isn't the same as being present. I miss you. I miss us. And I don't want our marriage to slowly disappear just because neither of us is brave enough to talk about it." For a moment, Mark didn't speak. His expression shifted from confusion to guilt, then to something softer, a recognition of what he had been ignoring. "I didn't realize you felt so alone," he admitted. "I thought you understood how busy work has been." "I do," she said, "but I need you too." Mark stepped closer, rubbing his forehead. "I'm sorry, truly. I've been so wrapped up in work that I forgot what I was working for." It was the first honest moment they had shared in months. They talked for nearly an hour about schedules, about emotions, about responsibilities, about reconnecting. No dramatic outbursts, just two adults trying to save something that still mattered. When Mark finally embraced her, it didn't fix everything, but it was a start, a real one. That night, Emily walked past Liam's room. He stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame, as if waiting to know how things turned out. She smiled softly. "We talked. It was needed." He nodded with relief. "Good. I'm glad." Was no tension left between them, no lingering confusion, just mutual respect, and an understanding that emotional storms pass when handled with honesty. "Thank you," she said, "for caring, for noticing, for being kind. You deserve that," he replied simply. And just like that, the air cleared. The home felt lighter. The boundaries were clear, again not out of fear, but out of maturity. Emily went to bed that night knowing something important. Kindness can fill loneliness. but clarity protects hearts. Her marriage wasn't perfect, but she had taken the first. Step 2, repair it. Her relationship with Liam wasn't tangled anymore, was gentle, healthy, respectful. And for the first time in a long while, the house felt like home again. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally honest.